If you have a true scary story you would like to see featured on this channel, just go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so, to send it my way. And of course, thank you. So, let me start by saying that my brother and I are extremely experienced desert campers, and we've lived near deserts pretty much our whole lives. I have never in the 20 years of my life, for 1 second, believed in anything paranormal or anything to do with evil spirits. Unlike my brother, who has always sensed presences and been able to see mostly what we call jinn, also known as demons. Until last night, which is safe to say, marks the last time we will be camping alone in the desert. We always have the same place that we like to go when we went to camp, with minimum effort. And our day started as normal as ever, but as we got closer and closer to our destination, I saw my brother's mood completely shift. And when I asked what was wrong, he just shrugged me off and told me to keep driving. When we arrived, I felt completely fine, but my brother was still unusually quiet. It was around 1 p.m. at that point, and we were planning on leaving at around 12 to 1 a.m. Because of the heat, we made the terrible decision to set up under a few trees and a source of water, which in Middle Eastern culture is where the jinns live at night. Not that I believed that at the time, of course. However, we still set up our camp and continued on as normal. Now, my brother always says that when he feels a presence, or several in this case, he gets extremely unlucky. First, he almost dropped a box of coals on his foot. Then he spilled an entire bottle of Coke on his phone. Then he dropped it into the sand, and then proceeded to smash his elbow on the edge of the chair he was sitting on, which is now very swollen. And last but certainly not least, when he was looking through one of the boxes, he felt something cold and sharp press right against his arm, and he realized it was an unsheathed knife, which we packed with its case the previous night before, and he later said it felt like something pushed his hand into it, right where his veins are. All of these events consecutively within a matter of a few hours was certainly making us both uneasy, and I, for the life of me, could not figure out why he was suddenly so unlucky. As I was starting to question his clumsiness, a random couple appeared out of nowhere, informing us that they were stuck in the sand and needed help. We drive a Land Cruiser and they had a Nissan Altima, so we didn't expect to encounter as many issues as we did. We first dug them out without any issue, but as we pushed them out of the sand, they ended up getting stuck again. If you know anything about dune bashing or desert camping, then you understand the physics behind how wheels get stuck in the sand, and the way this Nissan was stuck was incredibly unusual. It was literally stuck somewhere with plenty of space available for grip. And later on, my brother said that as we were digging them out of the sand, that's when he really started feeling the evil presence around us, but didn't want to say anything so as to not ruin the trip and freak me out. We ended up having to tow them out of the sand, which again was far harder than it had to be. First, our tow strap broke off their bumper. Tow straps cost $200 and was fine, but their bumper was slightly damaged. Then we almost got stuck ourselves, and a 20-minute job took more like 90, which again was extremely unusual, and in hindsight, was just the beginning of all the crap to come. When we came back to our camp, we noticed how everything around us had gotten unusually quiet. The area that we were in has hundreds of birds around, and as far as we've seen, 3 cats, who sometimes pay us a visit. But there wasn't a single noise at all, other than our fire, which was dying out unusually quick. It had gotten dark quickly, so we had to scramble to build a fire to cook our dinner before we were asked to help the couple. And I had noticed the silence, but it hadn't bothered me. However, my brother suddenly grabbed my hand as we were sitting down to eat and said with clear fear in his voice that we should go as quickly as possible and that he didn't feel safe. To ease both of our minds, we prayed. We're Christians, so of course we thought it would help us. But I think that it accelerated everything that happened and just made whatever was there with us angry. We quickly finished our dinner, and me being the skeptic, I was completely fine. I was pretty much just humoring my brother until I started getting the nagging feeling that it was time to pack up and leave. It hit me like a wave, and I was quite taken aback by the feelings, so I voiced it to my brother, and he agreed that we should pack up right away and get out of there. We started packing up at a normal pace, like we were just tired and wanted to leave. And that was when we heard a sound very close to us, on the opposite side of the pond, which wasn't that big. I can only describe it as the sound of death itself, and it seemed to go on for several minutes. And when I say that we looked at each other in absolute fear, I genuinely mean that I was ready to have a heart attack right then and there. At that point, after being frozen for a few minutes, and quite reasonably so after hearing that bellowing screech so close to us, we turned on the car, drove it back so we could see better with the headlamps, and just started throwing everything into the car, without much care, but with a whole lot of urgency. And it was like, after the screaming, that's when stuff really hit the fan. First, it was the sound of twigs snapping and footsteps all around us. Then it was the shadows behind the trees. I tried everything to try and get those shadows to change shape, walking around the trees and moving the lights, but nothing. It looked like there were people just staring at us the whole time, and you could really feel it, too. We really felt like we were not alone, and that we were not with friendly entities either. We also noticed that all three cats were huddled right behind our car, away from the trees, so they weren't the ones snapping the twigs, but literally did not care if they were not going to move. I was still getting out of there. Thankfully, they left when we started reversing, but they too looked absolutely terrified, and were just staring at the trees too. It also felt like whatever was there was getting closer. I've never felt anything like it. It was a gut feeling, and you just know it's one of those natural instincts that you should not ignore. Thankfully, we were able to pack up quickly. Our tent was very close to the trees, though, and that was a nerve-wracking experience. And whilst we're packing, it's still very silent. It's very normal for the birds around that area to continue making sound until 2 or 3 in the morning. And at this point, it was about 8 p.m., so it was highly unusual. I personally think that I was more terrified. As I was driving away back onto the main dirt path to leave the desert, I know cars very well. I know how they drive in the sand, and I know our car especially well because we've had it for so long. I could instantly tell that the steering was off and completely fighting against me, which fixed itself the second we were on the highway. The sound of twigs snapping was still all around us, and it was loud enough to be heard over the sounds of the car, and on the path was what seemed like every bird that was in the area, just standing there, staring at us until we got close enough to force them to walk, not even fly, away. At one point, my brother just grabbed my shoulder and told me very sternly to keep looking in front of me, and under no circumstances to look through his window. It was the tone of his voice that told me to listen to him, for the love of God. We were in a part of the desert where we had to pretty much drive through the whole of the accessible area to get onto the highway, and there wasn't a single person around us. The only thing we saw was a very clearly abandoned Toyota Hilux, positioned behind a small dune, and hidden by the trees, but that was far enough from our campsite to easily be ruled out as the source of the original screech. The worst thing that I saw was, as we were closing to the exit. Now, we know these deserts very well. We've both grown up here and have been riding dirt bikes and quad bikes in these deserts since we moved here, and we know what wildlife to expect. Cats, birds, spiders, goats, camels, mice, foxes, and maybe even the occasional scorpion if you're really unlucky. Or a snake, but that's it. There's nothing else in these deserts. But we saw, standing in the middle of the path, staring directly at us, a deer. A freaking deer. I've only ever seen one deer in 16 years of living here, and that was in someone's garden as a pet. It's safe to say that I was in complete shock, and the deer was just not moving at all, until I got close enough that we could practically smell the thing before it walked off the path whilst staring directly at us. We quickly moved past the deer, and again, my brother said with a gasp, but very sternly, to keep my eyes on the road. I asked him as we got on the highway what it was that he kept seeing, and he very reluctantly told me that he kept seeing large figures around us anytime we went through a bend, and they were all either pointing right at us or ahead of us. I'm very glad that he didn't tell me at the time, because I would have lost it. We still were yet to encounter anyone, but we still very clearly heard sounds all around us. And again, not the usual bird or cat, but very clearly big and unrelenting. When I saw the exit, I was as happy as I have ever been. But that quickly faded when, once again, we saw another deer standing right in the middle of the road, slowly walking away, looking right at us. Except, this time, it didn't really look like a deer. More like a kangaroo mixed with a deer, and its eyes were milky and just... it looked rotten and horrible. But I didn't much care. I just stepped on the gas, and fortunately it had gotten out of the way in time. Now, when you exit the desert, you can either turn right onto a long stretch of highway, or you can go left and go through a small town and then take the back streets to a parallel highway. And as I was about to turn right, my brother, once again with that same tone of voice, said to go to the town and to go to the right. Later, he once again said that he saw a line of figures pointing ahead of us. So, if we would have gone that way, we wouldn't have made it home in one piece. Thankfully, as we made it further and further away, and close to our home, the gut feeling of being watched was going away. And, of course, having never experienced something like this before, I was distraught, and I wanted to talk about it. My brother told me as we were going home that, because we were alone, the Jinn wanted to mess with us. That they wanted to scare us and most likely cause us harm, and that the way they get to you in such rural places is to force you to stop and then do whatever they want. Which makes sense as to why there were so many animals in our path. He also said that they caused bad luck, and that he could feel them the second we entered the desert, which explains his clumsiness all day, and the car that got stuck in such an unusual manner. This is also my younger brother, by 3 years, and naturally any time he ever told me about this sort of thing, I just always dismissed him as him scaring himself. I can excuse the sounds that we heard and the shadows that we saw last night. I can excuse the gut feeling as just being scared. But I cannot excuse the 2 deer that we saw staring right at us. And I cannot excuse the car just randomly fighting against me as I was driving. The deer completely freaked me out, as did the tone of my brother's voice. I'm also sorry if this is written sporadically, as I'm still shaken up and trying to make sense of everything. And it's safe to say that we are not going camping there again, and it's also safe to say that I'm never dismissing my brother when it comes to this kind of thing again. And I am so thankful that we made it home safely. I also forgot to mention that as we were setting up our tent, it was fighting us. We would secure one end of it into the ground and instantly another end would pop out. And after we finally managed to get it set up, it looked as if something was pushing it in, and it collapsed once before we got it back up. And again, it looked like something was pushing on it, which is something neither of us have ever experienced before, and we've even set up tents in the middle of a sandstorm. Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm currently 22 years old, and I've always been interested in the paranormal. I set out to write about all of my experiences that I can recall, the longest one being about a house I lived in as a kid. I'm from Denmark, so my grammar isn't going to be perfect, but I'll try my best. So, these are some haunted house stories from my childhood home. A little background. My mom, my then stepdad, our dog, and me moved into this house when I was 12. It was actually a basement apartment. There were people living upstairs that rented out their basement. It's kind of confusing, but it was actually pretty big. We moved out when I was about 16, so this happened in the span of 4 years. So, anyways, we moved in and everything was well. About a week after we moved in, I had a friend over to see our new living space and was really excited to show her. My dog, a very peaceful, quiet, lazy, and just not violent at all dog, went into my room and started barking his head off. He never barked. He was standing on 2 feet and barking at the corner of my bed. It was just really weird. So here I am trying to calm my dog, but he just won't give it up. When standing on 2 legs, which he was my height. For some weird reason, neither my mom nor my stepdad heard it, and we even had the door open. So I went out to get them while my friend is freaking out, and then he just calmed down like nothing happened. That was the first weird thing to happen in that house, but not the last. We would occasionally hear high heels walking above us, chairs being pulled out, and very loud bangs, all coming from upstairs. So we asked them if anything had happened, and they told us no, that they were asleep. It would always happen at night. It wasn't until they went on vacation and the noise continued that we started feeling weird. They had an alarm as well, and it would go off about once a week for no apparent reason, but they never spoke about it. I remember we would eat in the kitchen and all of us would turn our heads to the hallway at the same time because we all thought we saw someone. It was so weird. It happened all the time, and it just became the norm. We told ourselves that it was our imagination. We often thought that someone had broken in, and countless times my stepdad went up there with the flashlight, but there was no one. I would often wake up hearing noises in the kitchen, thinking that my mom had woken up. It sounded like people cooking. I would soon come to realize every time I heard those noises, there was no one. The noises would always stop when I entered the kitchen. The scariest thing to happen in that house, though, were to my stepdad. I went into their room, just woken up, and he says, "Wow, you were up early today." And I was like, "No, I just woke up." And as I said that, all the light from his eyes just vanished. He told me and my mom that he had gotten woken up by what he thought was me staring at them. And when he asked me what was wrong, and I didn't say anything, I just kept staring until I walked away. He said that the girl that he saw was wearing a white dress and had long black hair. I have brown hair, and I don't own a white nightgown, so I don't know why he would have thought that was me. So, sometime later, we had dinner with our neighbors, where this topic came up. They told us that there was actually a murder in the house. Like, a girl actually got killed. And they even had the newspaper articles about it. It happened right outside my room. The girl who was killed was pregnant. The man who got her pregnant already had a wife, so he killed her, and tried to make it look like a suicide, which he apparently was really bad at. The time we lived in that house, I actually wasn't having the greatest years. I spent 4 years in that house, and all of those years were filled with depression and anxiety. I never had hope, and it was always like a black cloud of smoke was hanging around me. Only in the house, though. I remember clearly that every time I went out, I was happy. And I thought it was weird. I told my mom about it, and she told me the same thing happened to her. Another thing about the house is that things would go missing, and we would look everywhere for them, and then the next day they would show up on, like, a table or somewhere really obvious, where we had already looked. I was so attached to that house that I didn't want to leave my room. I always made up excuses not to leave the house, and I was just miserable. I would have really bad nightmares of a tall black figure in our living room, with the biggest grin on his face. I've never been so scared from a nightmare, and I was really scared to be in the living room alone. One time, and this is really dark and I don't know why I'm sharing this, but as mentioned, I was in a really dark period of my life, and I was in the bathroom, one of the darkest places in the whole house. I was looking in the mirror, and my eyes were black, and I started smiling. I swear I was crying dark, thick liquid out of my eyes. Honestly, it's so messed up, I know, but obviously this was only happening in the mirror, not in real life. The last thing I remember is me reading a book late one night, and I saw a dark figure out of my eye. I turned to look, and there's nothing. It happens a few moments later again, and I look again, and my blanket on my chair is swinging back and forth, like if someone had walked into it. It was a summer night, and I had no windows open, so it scared me a lot. I just put my blanket over my head and tried to sleep. My mom also told me that when she went to go to the bathroom late at night, she thought that my stepdad was on the computer. So right as she was closing the bathroom door, the man sitting on the computer waved and smiled at her, and she waved back, thinking it was my stepdad. And when she got out, the computer was turned off and my stepdad was fast asleep. She woke him up, asking if he was just on the computer, to which he replied no, very confused. Apparently he had been asleep for some time. The rest of this post, as the OP put it, are other random stories. From what I can tell, they are not related to the house, but they are good haunting stories, so I would like to include them. It's hard to imagine it's real, but I remember this very vividly. We were moving into an apartment. I was around 4. I was standing in my new room when my dad said, "I'll turn off the lights. Are you coming?" And at the time, I was really afraid of the dark, but for some reason I told him I wanted to stay. So he turned off the light and everything got pitch black, and I saw a girl. I wasn't scared. She wouldn't talk, but I tried to talk to her. She was a little older than me, maybe 6 or 7. I thought that she was an angel because I didn't know what ghosts were back then, but I don't know. She was in this glowing white light, and it just felt so pure. I can't explain it. My dad got back and turned the light on again, and she was gone. I never saw her again, but I thought about her a lot. One time, me and my boyfriend were sleeping, and I had to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. I open the door, and I hear people talking in the living room. I was scared witless, until I realize it's a video from my boyfriend's computer. The weird thing is, the screen is closed and he turned it off, so we had to turn it back on to close the video. It's still so weird, like, how does that even happen? It was so loud, like the volume was all the way up. He swore that he had turned off the laptop and it made absolutely no sense. Another time, from 18 to 20, I lived in a place with staff who could help you, because of my anxiety and autism. One day I'm in my living room listening to loud music when I hear my front door open. I assume it's someone who works here, so I stop the music and look. It's a man in an orange vest. Like worker clothes, if you're an electrician or something, and he has a tool bag with him as well. I'm hella confused and I just look at him. For some reason, he does not look at me at all. We never make eye contact, and he was probably just standing in my kitchen for like 10 minutes. I was so confused, because I wasn't expecting anyone to come look at anything, and after 10 minutes, again, without eye contact, he just walks out again. So I contact the workers and was like, who is that guy that was just here? And they're like, what guy? I explain what happened, and she looks worried. So she asks her boss if they're expecting any handymen or something today, and they weren't. No one had seen this guy. It was like he had just vanished. They go on and asked if I had dreamed it, and I'm like, I was jamming out to music. Like, I wasn't sleeping at all. They could not explain it. And I don't know if it was paranormal, but it was definitely weird. I've also had dreams where my mom was in the hospital. I call her and tell her about my dream, and she goes on to tell me that she was actually in the hospital that day. I've had so many weird dreams about my mom come true. It's just really weird. All in all, I think that me being autistic and a bit sensitive, I definitely attract these kinds of things. I've told this story once before, but I figured I would share it again. And this was when I was a kid. Middle or elementary school aged, I can't remember. It involves me and an old friend of mine, whom I don't see or talk to anymore, and we'll call him Adam. I was staying at Adam's house one night, and I planned on sleeping over that night. For some reason, at between 10 p.m. and 12 a.m., Adam and I decided to sleep at my house. I don't know why or what even compelled us to walk in the middle of the night from his house to mine. Alone, mind you, but we did. So, we were walking up this hill, and the way Adam's house was positioned, it was at the bottom of two hills, one on the left and one on the right. So as we went up that hill that led to my house, we had made it up the hill, and there was 3 ways to go: left, right, and straight forward. So we turned left. My house wasn't far from the point that we turned. As we were walking, we both got this weird feeling that we were being followed and watched. I know that I did. I'm only assuming that by the look on Adam's face, he felt it too. And we both looked at each other and then looked behind us. And there we saw him. Or it. Or something. What was before us was a figure. Based on the body type, it was possibly male, with his hands in his pockets, and his hood over his head, and there was just pitch blackness. We couldn't see his face. It was as if there wasn't one. Both Adam and I were creeped out, so we turned our heads forward and kept walking to my house. Then, the footsteps got faster. We turned around once again, and that's when we saw this figure running at us. And that's when Adam and I took off. We both managed to get into my house before he could get to us, and after we both got into my house and shut the door, we turned around and looked outside thinking that we'd see him again. But nothing. We saw nothing. He was just gone. What's even freakier is when we first noticed him, we didn't see anyone walking on the road before we turned to walk to my house. This person, or figure, was gone as mysteriously as he appeared. Adam and I were freaked out. We looked around for him from the safety of the house, and we thankfully weren't that stupid to go outside after that scare. Shortly thereafter, we went to bed. Then, we just drifted apart as friends. It was as if neither of us had the desire to continue being friends after that night. To this day, I don't know what we saw or why we drifted apart, but I still find it creepy how shortly after seeing the thing, Adam and I had no desire to be friends after that. I don't know if the two events are connected, or if we were just both creeped out or what, but thankfully I never saw that thing again. Sometimes I do get a chill up my spine though, as if I'm being watched. I have never seen or had anything like this happen. A little backstory. It was my ex and I living in a one-bedroom apartment. The one that I still reside in today. This older guy I had met, Dan, owned this house with 4 different units, all one bedroom. Well, he got lung cancer and boom, 6 months later he was gone. His grandmother originally owned this place, and I'm not sure of who owned it before her. Anyways, after he passed, my ex and a neighbor who lived in one of the other units, Sharon, decided to make a Ouija board and do it. Now, Sharon was Dan's niece, and they were curious to see if they would get any answers. Neither of them know how to safely use a Ouija, and when I had found out about this, I was a little upset, as I've had experiences with them before. None really good, to be honest. I don't like that you have to give an entity permission to use your body as a conduit to move the planchet. I prefer spirit boxes or other methods. At this point, I've always been interested in the paranormal, and have had experiences, but nothing quite like what I'm about to detail. So, a couple of days go by. I've forgotten all about the Ouija board. I'm getting home from work. I work the second shift, so it was past midnight, and my ex was also working, so the lights were off, and it was dark when I arrived. I come through the door to see shimmering bits of light reflecting off of my living room floor. I quickly turned on a light and was shocked to see a tempered glass pane that had come from a coffee table. I had put it on top of my wooden coffee table. Well, I start recording as I thought somebody had possibly broken in. I checked the place first, obviously, and it's not like it's a big place for anyone to hide. But the glass pane had exploded wall to wall with glass. I still find glass to this day from that table. Now, it had all spidered out from a covered candle that happened to be used in the Ouija session. I've dropped stuff on this table, and it's had its fair share of usage, but the only thing I'm aware of that can create the force that was needed for this glass pane to explode would be a rapid temperature change, which it was summertime in New England, or something contacting it just right to make it shatter. But this wasn't just a shatter. Entire chunks were blown off of the table in every direction. It was quite spooky, honestly. When my ex got home, I was recording the video and she was just as uneasy about this as me. Long story kind of short, that event kicked off a month-long of intense poltergeist activity that neither of us had experienced before. It was getting to the point where we were lost as to what to do. Get a priest? I had sage cleansed the place, but it actually made things worse. The last straw for me is when we had just gotten home from grocery shopping about a week after the table, and I know beyond a doubt that I placed the cat litter on the kitchen table. My ex left to go back to the store because we forgot something, so I went outside to have a cigarette. And I can see my front door, but I can't see inside the house. My cat was outside with me, sitting by the window. Now, the cat litter bag was made of a plastic that had a very distinct sound, and then all of a sudden I heard what sounded like someone picking it up, placing it on the floor, and then tipping it over. I heard and felt the thud as it hit the ground gently. My cat's ears were straight up and extremely focused on whatever was happening inside the house. I go up to the door, which has a window on it. Without entering, I look through and the cat litter bag was in the middle of my kitchen floor. I mean, We would have had to have walked around it. To be sure I wasn't going insane, I called my ex, Becky, and asked her what I did with the bag of litter. She said that I put it on the table, and I know that I did. There were a couple of other events that led up to this, so I'm laughing in just pure shock as to what the hell is going on, and then I decided to enter the apartment. As soon as I tried to take a step in, well, the only way I can describe it is that I felt something pass through me. I started shaking uncontrollably, and that persisted for hours. And then I started crying. But it didn't feel like my emotions. I was baffled and had no idea why I was crying. Becky got home and asked me why I was crying, and I was just like, I don't know. And then laughed. But yeah, totally the most bizarre thing I have ever experienced. My conclusion is that I'm not sure if it was a coincidence or what, but someone gave me some Native American stuff to try, and it did taper off after that, which was a relief. My honest opinion is whatever they made contact with on the Ouija board was not our friend Dan who had recently passed. It was malevolent for sure, as it was getting more and more aggressive, and it literally felt heavy in here. I would get home from work and would sit down, but would all of a sudden feel this overwhelming presence. Like, very oppressive. Your body can sense this stuff. Like, have you ever entered a room where people were just arguing or something, and you can just feel the tension in the air, and your instincts kick in trying to tell you that something is off? No, that's what it would feel like. If I figure out how to add the video, then I will. Have any of you had similar experiences like this? I mean, this made me open my eyes quite a bit, and started rabbit-holing with the subject as I find it fascinating. So, yeah, I'm just curious what you guys think about this story, or if you've had any similar experiences. So that, my friends, was a collection of some interesting and terrifying paranormal stories. Some of these were a bit different than the norm, but I quite enjoyed them. I quite enjoyed these stories, these paranormal stories. They were really, really good. Probably good for the entertainment value or the interest value, not good for the experience value. But alas, there are things out there that we will never understand, that we can't understand, that we have to just accept happen and hope they don't happen to us. Yeah. Anyways, a huge thank you to everyone who submitted their stories or let me use their stories for this video. You all are amazing. Also, thank you to anyone who listens and got to this point of the video. You all are even more amazing, because you listened all the way through. You got to this point, and I want you to know that I love you. I do. I love and appreciate every single one of you. You all are amazing people, and you're doing amazing things. Never forget it. Yeah. If you enjoyed this video, please do hit that thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard and want more content like this, consider subscribing, as that helps. I think something like 66% of my listeners are not subscribed, if I remember correctly. I looked it up last night, and I'm pretty sure it was 66 or 63, something in there. It's a huge number. So, if everybody who listened to me subscribed, I would have nearly 60,000 subscribers right now, which is pretty insane, considering I'm only at 18 something. But anyways, consider subscribing if you would. If you're feeling so bold, you can leave me a comment down below letting me know your thoughts, if you've ever had a paranormal experience, anything like that. If you have and want to have me read it, please send it via the website, astheravendreams.com. On the website, there is a big button that says send your story or submit your story. It's big in the center of the screen, so yeah. Anyways, friends, I hope you're having a beautiful day. Hope your week is going wonderfully, and I hope I do see you again soon. But until then, remember, you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you're the best you that you can be. Never let anyone tell you otherwise, and never forget it, please. Please, never forget it. You're an amazing person. You're doing amazing things. It may not seem like it sometimes. Sometimes those little clouds do hang around. But it's okay. Because behind every cloud is the shining sun. And that's you. You're that shining sun. Anyways, till I see you again, much love, and sleep well.